The challenge the bros faced was to find their next fix. They were on the worst come-downs of their lives. I heard it later that they didn't come quietly. This may be no surprise, but when I also add they did make escape attempts, I'm sure you can imagine the task the good gang faced. The agents managed to contact Owen Ranch. The information they gave of their journey so far was a relief, but by no means it did not leave us at ease. With warning of Macrae and the huntsman in particular, Kim held discussion with their team as to the next best course of action. Cooper discovered there was some of his dad's cars in the area and he was calling it in. The vehicle was called Dusty. Its treads were such it could climb across dunes with ease. Their traction allowed them to sway among the sands as though they were dancing. Their dusty colour made them the least conspicuous of the Cooper fleet. Whilst they waited, Buddy and his bros decided it would be an opportune time for them to make an escape. They made a clumsy dash for it, but Teddy lassoed his young relative and heaved him back. Cooper had been too clumsy looking behind him. He hadn't seen Kim reach out her arm and wrestle onto the ground. Chad had met his match with Lydia, who kicked him in the solar plexus and punched him back. Escaping the agents was going to be harder than they thought. Making their way along in the back of Dusty, the bros had been humbled and a little bruised. Buddy had given thought to what awaited him back in Colford. "Dude, I can't go back there," Buddy mused, outwardly returning to Colford now seemed a terrible idea. Cooper was nodding in agreement. Being driven back home in the back of one of his father's fleet did not bode well for him. Chad had a plan, though. He had thought it through. It may have worked for a little while, but since he hadn't reiterated his plan to his bros, they were just surprised as anyone when he buzzed down the window and threw himself out onto the road. "Is that one just throwing himself out the fucking car?" Kim groaned. Teddy turned the wheel of the car and it ever so slowly pulled aside. Still handcuffed and a little injured from underlying rocks, Chad was planted back into the car and the windows locked. Travelling along again, the bros had fallen into a silence. Chad broke it when he said, "Really thought we're all gonna jump, bro." "Yeah, sorry about that, bro," said Buddy, sitting back and raising his eyebrows. Cooper leaned forward to look at him. He shook his head and he too sat back. "Ow," Chad said. The three started to snigger, leaving their handlers shaking their heads. They were being taken back to Colford one way or another. They had to face that fact. They also had to face up to what had happened on Hatfield Bay Island. The presence of the bros on the island was driving Dominic to the very ends of his patience. He was expressing such sentiments to Peter as they passed through the commune. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," stated the church leader. "It has been quite the challenge, Your Eminence," Peter agreed. Frowning severely, Dominic growled, "Then flog them!" "Terrible idea, Your Eminence. Bart got the impression the one called Chad would rather liked it." "If they want to be members of this congregation, then they need to learn there are consequences," Dominic decided. The Wigan commune has some strange practices. Dating back to the time Noah Wigan first set foot on the bay and his companion St. Michael the Punisher burned those who would not follow him. Sometimes a chosen soul would be placed inside a box and pushed out to sea. As the waves consumed the victim, those still of the commune would see life blossom as Wigan thanked him for their dutiful sacrifice. When the bros started to argue over who got to go in the box first, it made the church leader feel his action was obsolete. There was a pit dug in the bay that was filled with Geiger sand beetles. Such beetles gave the victim nasty little bites. Lying in a pit of them for days with open sores and constant nibbling was a fate that would have even the least devout crying for Wigan's mercy. When Chad started to bite the beetles back, Cooper was treating it like some kind of frat boy hazing, and the beetles inexplicably gave Buddy a wide berth like he had a force field around him. The church leader decided another approach was necessary. The threat of crucifixion just ignited a debate over which way a bro should hang on the cross. "Yo bro, I want to hang upside down. I want to go head first straight to hell and share Jay with Satan." "Can we put them upside down?" Dominic asked Peter excitedly. He really did like the idea and was kicking himself that he hadn't thought of it first. "Terrible idea, Your Eminence," Peter said, and all the fun was drained from that scenario. It came to be that all three of them were stood before the Wigan altar. "You need to change your way of life," Dominic told the three bros. "St. Michael the Punisher will step back on these shores again and you will repent." But he listened to the words of the preacher, but he had some questions. "Yo, you say this Punisher will come to the island?" "Yes," Dominic returned assuredly. And you will repent. But how do you know that? Buddy continued to ponder. Do you hit up a bro and say, Yo, Punisher, come and check out this happening party with all the punishment and shit? And he'd be like, I'm away, bruh. Not exactly, was Dominic's response. So you spoke to the guy? Buddy wondered. Because if he's the party planner around here, you gotta have that bro on speed dial. It doesn't work like that. Dominic's patience was wearing thin again. It's about having faith. Buddy frowned. So he ain't real. Dominic's shoulders tightened. Yeah, it's too real. Then why haven't you spoken to him? Dominic turned to Peter. Is he serious? He asked. Peter nodded. I believe so, Your Eminence. He was a little flabbergasted himself by this point. If he's real, then call him up. Bring him on over, Buddy challenged. I gotta be punished, bro, a giddy Chad exclaimed. Again, turning to Peter, Dominic asked, Do you think he'd come if we wrote him a wee note? The direct descendant of St. Michael still lived, it was said. He resided in solitude. They called him the Templar. Dominic had met him personally, but he had faith. It would be the first time in generations the church called for his presence, said Peter. It would make you the boldest leader this church has seen since Wigan himself. Dominic beamed. You hear that? He put to the bros. How's that for God balls? Buddy nodded. Pretty rad, bro. He's real. Peter scowled and Dominic raged. He pulled his iron cross from the wall of the church. He didn't have the patience to wait on St. Michael. He wanted instant retribution. He swung the cross at Cooper first. Being a lifelong victim of having things thrown at his head, be it his mum's shoes or his father's car tools, Cooper dodged effortlessly. Swing, not once. Swoop, not twice. Swish, but 3 times. Will you stand still? Dominic groaned. Cooper could not. It was a natural survival reflex. Dominic stopped. Still clutching the iron cross, he turned to Chad. You, he pointed. Tearing at his robes, Chad cried out in relation. Yes, punish me, Your Eminence. Punish my ass. Dominic paused. You just made it weird, he remarked. Hopping onto his other foot, he swung the cross like a baseball bat. Clang! He caught Buddy, who had still been heavily medicated at this point. It was going to take more than an iron cross to knock some sense into him. In demonstration of this fact, the lone frat boy hit back. Wham! Dominic was landed on his altar. Buddy flexed his arms in front of him. Little bitch, he yelled. When a fork of lightning struck, the 3 frat boys cleared the church. I guess they weren't taking any chances on some holy shit going down. Shall I compose a letter to the Templar? Peter asked. Immediately, Dominic growled. There is a cheer about Halffield Bay. At least there was at one point. As Wigan followers pushed towards the city and the city dwellers imposed themselves upon the island, it caused tensions to rise. The old church leader, Parson Verger, had been too busy enjoying a hedonistic lifestyle to care for the welfare of his people, but Dominic Cole took over with a youthful fire in his belly. He was hell-bent on bringing the faith to the masses. He saw it as his path, and Wigan had illuminated the way. That was until the bros became members of the church. City dwellers get worse by the day, Dominic confided in Peter. It is a mess, Peter agreed. There is no peace with them. The city, main, is a epicentre of hedonism and unholiness. There's a place there, Walden's they call it. I've heard talk about it, Peter said. Is it true it's a place where the people become possessed with the filth? I've heard that unbridled fornication goes on in the bathrooms until the wee hours of the morning. If there is a hell on earth, that sounds to me like the place. If that is true, Peter said, then I know 3 people who may have witnessed it firsthand. Bro, you don't want to go to Walden's unless you want to catch something. It's all about posh bitches and Alban douchebags that go there, get all out of their minds and drugs and shit. And then the next day there's a line at the chemist for antibiotics for the morning after pill, was Buddy's most poetic interpretation. The morning after pill, Dominic questioned. Abortion in a can, bro. Dominic thought. It actually sounded much worse than he'd originally anticipated. It isn't clear as to whether or not Chad genuinely considered the Walden heathens. All that I know is the bros had been thrown out on their last visit and given a lifetime ban from the nightclub. Yeah, Buddy agreed. Those heathen son of bitches got all high and mighty because a bitch got stuck in the bathroom window. Panties were already at her ankles when we got there. The flowers we put in her ass belonged to one of the Waldens, bro, Cooper remembered. Fuck them, he said. I was making her daisy fresh. The way she was hanging there, some animal could have come along and raped her and shit. I was doing her a favour, keeping them away. Disregarding the fact that he could have helped retrieve the girl from her predicament, it was actually progress for Buddy and the bros. In hindsight, if it had been some of their worst days, the girl could have been subjected to much worse than flower stems in her rear. Whilst the bros chuckled at the memory, Dominic was staring at them in disbelief. I'm at a loss for words. I really don't know what to say. Bart, who had been subjected to more of Jerry's stories than Dominic had, was not in the least bit surprised. For it was written that St. Wiggin returned to the shores of Colford, and when he saw the brothers of Albin's order had done with their people, he wept. Brother Ambrose had left them with no direction, no hope, and he had allowed them to turn their backs on God. Noah Wiggin pleaded with the Albin's brotherhood, but they refused his advice. Return to the island, they warned him. Your advice is not welcome here. They had been granted the honour of leading the people of what would become city men in holy lives, but they failed them. To Noah Wiggin and his followers, they were not holy men at all, but a group of drunkards. Where did that lead them? Nowadays, by Dominic's reckoning, the order had allowed the city to become a cesspit. Every day more and more were fleeing to Wiggin's embrace, looking for a better life. The powder and main you get is shit too, Bruddy reasoned. All the good shit you get at the chapter house. Capiso finest. Capiso! Capiso! Praise Wiggin, responded the two islanders in something of an agreement. We should visit this nightclub, Dominic decided. I think it'd be do's good to take a look at just how far the city has fallen. You can't go dressed like that, bruh, Buddy told them. You two look like you ain't never seen a pussy before. You mean you look like pussies, but you look like you haven't actually pounded a pussy before. You gotta blend in, shit. Bart and Dominic shared a look. Well, you could do with a little work, said Bart. What are you talking about? I could easily pass as a city dweller. Here Dominic's rough islander accent took a different twang. Show me to the drugs, the booze, and the big-titted females. Like. He added the like as an afterthought, feeling it made him sound more city man-like. Bart wasn't able to contain himself. The three bros chuckled too. Well, Cooper and Chad did, but he kept his mind on the task, and never was there a more serious task for a bro than fucking up a nightclub. Make over time, Chad. It's time to make you pretty, bro. Weak! He blew his whistle. His whistle I'll get to a little later. Woo! Makeover time! Time to make you boneable, Chad cheered. Bachelor number one, Buddy announced, whilst Chad made a beat. They call him the carrier because he got broad shoulders. Here's Bartholomew wearing a Schroeder shirt that was all the rage decades ago, complete with a Wiggin medallion. He's ready to rip up that dance floor. Pussy magnet, bro! You pound of pussy, bro! Bart was chuffed, although the only way he was going to blend in was if he was going to some kind of nostalgia club. Bachelor number two! Be careful, bitches. This guy will smite you and he will smite you good. It's his elegance, himself, bringing back ruffled collars they ain't seen since the days my ancestor hen chased whores around those shores. Wait, it seemed Chad wasn't done with Dominic's hair. He affixed the church's leader's dark locks. There, he said. Perfect. Buddy nodded. Now you guys are ready to hit Walden's. Whether that was true or not was irrelevant because all attention was stolen. Kaboom! What the hell was that? Whoosh! A drift of sand almost swallowed the dunes. There's a fucking crater on the beach. Dominic could be heard crying. The three bros, some pre-war explosives, had a game of chicken they had forgotten about and had led to the disaster having to dig half the commune out of the sand. Have you seen the fucking crater on the beach? It was a long journey, but it gave Dan the opportunity to ask Teddy of his life on the ranch. Teddy told them of the delightful place he called home by the campfire whilst the bros rested. As time pressed on, Kim decided that splitting Buddy, Dale and Chad up would offer some reprieve from their nonsense, but it also offered her the opportunity to find out from Buddy what actually happened in Colford. There was a dead little girl named Sarah, and she knew he had been involved. The shot that had killed her had been inaccurate. The drug money that the little girl's father owed belonged to Cooper stores, and Chad, well, if the other two had been involved, he clearly had to be. When she showed Buddy the photos of the little girl, he became nervous. He sniffed, his head ached, and he was dehydrated. What do you want me to say? He asked a little desperately. I want you to tell me the truth. I don't know, he sniffed again. The truth was a lot grislier than Kim realised. Kill the little bitch first, was Buddy's instructions. Make sure father sees. Bang. Buddy had been so high at the time, he would have done anything. When he thought about it, if he was offered the release of powder, he would still do anything. That shit was terrifying. It's cold, bruh, he had objected at the time. He didn't want to do it, but then he was fed more powder, and the threats came. Not towards him, but Cooper. What would happen to Coops if he refused? Kids die in the shanties all the time. What was one more? The father had insulted a bro, and you weren't a brother for life if you didn't do something about that shit. The vantage point was a lonely spot. He could hear Jerry's laughter, but not really. He was living in a stank-hole Stoker retirement home in Kingsgate. They wouldn't even allow him back on their own estate. He sat a vegetable with the circus freaks. Buddy didn't want to become like that. No one wanted to be that guy. Shoot the little bitch first and make sure Daddy sees. Just one last hit, and he and his bros would be home free. He couldn't take it anymore. He had to run. He had to at least try. His attempt was to no avail, and as often in these adventures, he immediately ran into trouble. Big trouble. Back at Owen Ranch in Colford, the Cappy and I waited nervously for word on the agents. The Cappy was pacing. He cleaned his prize gun Betsy several times. We had sent them forward the information about what they were up against. We could only hope they got the message. Finally, a message did come through. The Cappy requested that there be no interruptions or interference, so the call came straight to him. It opened to show Kim and Lydia. Unfortunately, there was no relief. They were in custody. Before either the Cappy or I could inquire as to the state of their well-being, the screen showed a man with leathery, tan skin and tattoos across his neck that originated from the southern hemisphere. His name was Morales, and his cold expression told us something that will forever be etched in my mind. He didn't say anything at first. He held the Cappy's gaze. "Where's my boy?" Chick finally asked. Morales leaned a little closer to the camera, making his presence all the more imposing on the large screen. "He's gotten himself in a little deeper than he can swim," he replied, in an accent that sounded like it had been dragged across the earth. "Money is owed. A debt has to be paid." "Let them go and we'll talk," the Cappy offered. Morales gave a throaty laugh and shook his head. "You don't fucking negotiate with Macrae. You pay the goddamn money, they're owed. The debts are always collected. You don't fuck with the Red Cobra." The screen cut back to Dan and his fellow prisoners. Dan looked straight into the lens. "Guys," he whimpered. X stepped forward, raised a gun. Bang! Dan's chair toppled. Bang! Cooper was no more. Bang! And finally Chad. Bang! Finally it was Teddy. Then the call cut completely. Kim, Lydia and Buddy didn't have time to mourn Dan and Co on the screens within the kennels where she was being held. "You're fucked," she warned them. Morales didn't seem to care for her threat. "Take the other two for the dogs. Get this place cleaned up. We need a new host," he ordered onto his comm, presumably to X. "You, I'm leaving you to the huntsman." Clang, clang, clang. Cornered within the kennels, Buddy and Lydia had found themselves at the rear of the building. Having seen what happened to the others on the screens as Kim had, Buddy was distraught. His bros were gone. His cousin Teddy was gone. With a stroke of skill, Lydia broke from her captor. She leapt from her cuffs and armed herself with her gun. "Buddy," Lydia tried to console and motivate him, "we have to keep it together if we're going to make it out of here, okay?" She finally unruffled him. "Buddy," she called a little firmer this time, "are you with me?" Buddy nodded. He shook the pain from his wrists. It was nothing compared to what he had just witnessed. Lydia could hear the barking of dogs behind the metal shutter that had been pulled down. Slam! Buddy and Lydia soon found themselves with company as kennel keepers descended upon them. Lydia had drawn her firearm and taken out the two that had charged. "Jank!" Buddy called her attention. Lydia turned quickly and shot one of the keepers behind her before she took a machete blade in the back. She frowned at Buddy. "Jank? Really?" she growled. Buddy shrugged. "Sorry, dude, I know what your fucking name is." More kennel keepers were disposed of, thanks to Lydia's skill as an unarmed Buddy kept a watch over her. "You watch your back, Asian," he yelled. When she scowled at him again, she said, "Sorry, I actually meant Asian that time." There were warnings scattered everywhere. The huntsman, aka Rudder Nielsen, was a wanted man. As Morales departed for more important matters, Kim's first intentions were finding those of her cohorts who still lived. First she had to face the huntsman who stood before her with a tangle of thick dog chains in each hand. She thought of his MO. She remembered the notes on the Macrae brute and how the spines of his victims had been shattered under the blow of his chains. She thought of what her father, now paralysed after a boxing match had gone awry, had said to her. It's not about defeating the odds. It's about the fight at hand and taking each punch as it comes. Kim tensed her shoulders, pulled whatever strength she could into her arms. Whack! He smashed her to the ground. The leashes rattled just inches from her face. The huntsman swung his chains and caught her side and tumbled her to the ground. Defend. Whack! She was struck again on the ribs. They were bruised, possibly broken. Strike! She was knocked through a window partition. Being tactical, she disappeared to the darkness where she used the broken glass to cut her binds. She was free of her binds now, and it was time to hit back. Meanwhile, the dogs surrounding Buddy and Lydia were becoming angrier. "Give me a gun," Buddy requested. "Not a chance," Lydia maintained. "Crash!" The dogs were crashing against the gates. They could smell meat on the other side. The light above the shutter doorways blinked red. Crash! The light blinked green. The shutter doors raised and the inexcitable canines were gnashing underneath, trying to push through. Lydia turned to find Buddy had gone. She assumed his cowardice had caused a retreat. He would no doubt be running into more trouble. She had no time to check because the dogs were coming for her. She aimed her gun. Bang, 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 bang. Just as the gates lifted and the first wave of dogs charged through, the gunfire rang, but it had not come from Lydia. "Hurry, bro!" Buddy called to her. He had collected a gun from one of the fallen keepers. Despite the objections, luckily his instinct and his natural own marksmanship had been right. "Dude, follow me, there's a way open!" Lydia followed Buddy and the two dashed towards an exit to the building. Whack! Kim had struck back at the huntsman. She was a little feeble on her right side where her ribs had been struck, and the shards of her ribs had torn a hole in the flesh. Blood was seeping from the wound. Whack! She punched him again. He swung the chains again. Despite the pain, she skipped aside, opening the wound further. Whack! She tried to punch again, but this time the leashes caught her fist. They wrapped around her wrist and pulled her aside. Kim pushed back onto the balcony. She was losing energy fast and her vision was starting to blur. She took another strike from the leashes, fracturing her humerus. She was running out of strength. She was running out of time. She would be added to the list of victims on the huntsman's wanted poster. For her own sake, and for the sake of those the Macrae had exploited, she had to do something. "Is that the best you got? I'm gonna fuck your dead body." Kim, with her last ounce of ability, she asked, "You done?" He smiled. She punched the huntsman to the side of the head. It was enough to throw his gaze. She rested her foot on the balcony, and with a great heave, she pushed him over. As he fell to the floor, she could hear Buddy and Lydia arrive on the scene. "Bang, bang! Double tap, bitch!" Buddy cried as the huntsman was dispersed. "Get after him," Kim called. "Morales is getting away." A discarded motorbike offered Lydia and Buddy a chance of gaining speed, navigating the building and catching up with Morales. Buddy raised an eyebrow as he watched Lydia hotwire it. "Hop on," she told him. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Don't tell anyone I was riding bitch," he said. Lydia sped off towards a garage exit. Dogs were still chasing after them. More kennel keepers arrived on scene to carry out the clean-up Morales had spoken of. Bang! Buddy kept shooting. His remarkable aim gave them the slim chance they had of escaping. "That's for Coops," he yelled. Bang! "That's for Chad!" Bang! "That's for Daddy!" Bang! "That's for the Blue Pussy documentary guy! Suck my golf balls, motherfucker!" Lydia stared them through the narrow spaces. They could see Morales transport up ahead. Buddy leaned over and took out the rear left tyre, causing the vehicle to skid. Taking out the second rear tyre caused the vehicle to spiral and crash into the side of the building. Stopping the bike, Lydia took to her heels with Buddy close at her back. Ripping open the door, Morales was placed under arrest. Assisting Kim, Lydia and Buddy were planning on clearing the exit of the kennels. Buddy had fallen quiet as he gave thought to the fallen. They would have made it if they hadn't come face to face with X. "You're not going to get far," he warned them. Kim could feel her breath gargle as blood dripped into her lungs. "We need medics over here," X called. Kim frowned. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Sean Phoenix. I'm an agent for the Anti-Macro Intelligence Agency. I've been working undercover for some time. Now I thank the Lord Jesus you didn't blow up for me." Army medics descended upon them. "You killed," Lydia began. Before she could finish, Buddy cheered, "Bro, you're alive! I was all crying and upset and shit." Thankfully, Cooper, Chad, Dan and Teddy were still alive. X had staged the entire affair to appease Morales. "I had to get him out of the way," X went on to explain. "If I hadn't, you would have had more heat on you than you could have handled." "Thank you," Kim said, settling down for some medical attention. An army medic named Egret rushed to patch her up. She had been the one to help X stage the shooting. "Ah, you thought you were dead, yeah?" she teased. Dan nodded nervously and gave an even more anxious laugh. "She's magnificent," he said to Teddy. He found himself quite besotted, and in reciprocation, the medic with wild blue hair had a charming smile for him. "It's nice to meet you, yeah," she said. "Nice to meet you too," Dan said shyly but sincerely. "Don't thank me yet," said X. "You got a long way home. Be thankful the word reached me from Colford as to who you guys were." With further information from my source, I learned that AMIA had been set up by a global initiative as a means of preventing the spread of the Macrae infestation. It was something that was bigger and reached far beyond the borders of Colford City. The agents had inadvertently tapped the tip of that iceberg. With his position deep under cover, I'm afraid not much further information can be divulged at this stage regarding X, but what I can say is he was a useful ally to the agents, and there would be no doubt come a time when his assistance would prove useful again. Back in handcuffs and seemingly out of danger, the bros had reached the peak of their frustration. It is said that the first 24 hours of leaving an addiction behind were the worst, and what a 24 hours it had been. It wasn't the first time they had been in cuffs though, but the last time involved a safe word and a willing girl named Nola Wong. "If I don't get some powder on my nose, I think my head's gonna explode, bruh," Buddy complained. The others nodded. They felt it too. When Cooper's phone bleeped in his pocket, it sounded like a gong being rattled. Partially because of the come down, and partially because of his use of the gong ringtone from Kobe Games. "That's my Uncle Brett, bruh," Cooper announced excitedly, but in a whisper. "He must have gotten some gear. He must be nearby." Brett Cooper was the little ankle biter that Marshall's mad dog Brett had enough contacts to keep even Jerry Owens supplied, and that was a lot of snow. It was looking good for the bros. There was just one issue. They were handcuffed and the agents were stood nearby. "It's a pity we can't get out of these cuffs," Cooper said. Chad had already pulled his arm over his head, but now he was stuck with his nose close to his armpit. "Amazing Adrian. You know, the Stalker Circus guy. Escaped handcuffs by dislocating his thumbs," said Buddy. The handcuff trick, coincidentally, had been what Buddy had been attempting with Noah Wong. That was why the safe word was amazing. When Noah Wong swallowed the key, things got pretty amazing, pretty fast. "We can't leave a bro hanging," Buddy thought of Brett, especially if said bro was carrying a trunk load of the good stuff. "Coops, you're gonna have to break your thumbs." Cooper was nodding. He was still agreeing, but he had to ask, "Why my thumbs?" "Duh, bruh," was Buddy's response. "Yeah, duh." Crack! Ah! Cooper tried to stifle his yelps so the attention of the agents wasn't drawn. Snap! There was a tear in Cooper's eye. "Damn it, Chad, we only had to break one thumb." It was too late by then. Cooper had broken both his thumbs. Such was his dedication to his bros. It was really quite inspirational in its way. The fact that it was to feed a cocaine habit aside, they slipped away with Buddy leading the charge. Cooper was crying, excited, and quite a bit of pain. "Those three idiots are trying to escape again," Lydia said to Kim. "Get after them," Kim ordered, still nursing her wounds from her altercation with the huntsman. The bros can make a surprisingly good track time when there is some powder at stake. Devin could learn a lesson or two from them. It was home and free for the bros. After what had been a tumultuous few days, they were finally getting theirs. There is a selfish streak within any addict. They are so consumed by the need to fulfill their addiction, they don't realise the hurt they are causing those close to them. It's not a conscious, selfish decision, for the most part, and beating that addiction is forcing the addict to realise their actions have consequences. The Owens are generally self-indulged egotists. They have the whole world at their feet, and the influence to shape it into whichever image they want. This can be a huge burden on the shoulders of someone like Buddy. That burden is frightening. The Coopers value fast and shiny things. They spend so much time trying to impress those around them, they forget those who need them the most, like the lost son that Dale was. The Perrys were a loving family, but loving someone so much you place no boundaries on them only leads to trouble. A sporty black Cooper named Shadow was what Brett drove, and it appeared out of the mist like a desert mirage. It stopped. The bros were leaping up and down, hugging each other in celebration. Brett alighted from his car with a bag of powder in his hand so large it would outweigh a small child. Brett hugged his nephew in a slow gesture. The smoke and smell of weed that was puffed out of the Shadow's door was the reason for this pace. Buddy snatched up the bag greedily. He pulled it open and all three bros grasped like they had found the buried treasure. He held it out to Cooper first. "Go on, bruh. You get in there. You broke your thumbs for this, so you get first." Cooper beamed a wild smile. For a moment he forgot the pain in his thumbs and dunked his whole head in. Pulling back, he wheezed, wide-eyed with a face full of cocaine. "Whoa," Brett tried to warn. "You might want to go easy, little pup. That shit is pure." Even Noah Wong, shitting out the handcuff key, could not have excited Buddy more in that instant. He held the bag out to Chad. "Go on, bro. You get your fix. Because when you're done, I'm going to snort this whole bag." "It's real pure, man," Brett warned. What did he know? He was trying to slide along Shadow's hood and smoke a pipe. Chad scooped up as much as he could, rubbing it on his gums. His eyes lit up like a Harvester Day parade. Then it was Buddy's turn. Bang! Kim, just catching up, had shot the bag from Buddy's hand. It spilled to the ground. "No!" Buddy shrieked. He dropped to his knees and tried to get as much of the product as he could. Kim grappled him, hauling him away. The stitches on her wound split and blood began to seep again. Buddy pulled closer, but before he could find his release, splash! Lydia had thrown water over the powder, rendering it useless. "You fucking whore!" Buddy cried in despair. Kim fell to the ground, pulling Buddy with her. He was weeping. Teddy helped Kim to her feet. He warned Buddy to step lightly. Lydia looked at Cooper and Chad. Cooper was staring at her wide-eyed and was unable to speak. Chad had started a feel groove coming on. His hip was bobbing. "Come on, you two," she said with some exasperation, taking them by the arm and leading them away like escapees from the Royce Chamberlain Asylum. "You," Kim barked at Brett. "Welcome to Shadow. Drive, 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 drive! Zoom!" "Teddy, take the fucking car out," Kim ordered. Teddy flicked his gun from his holster and with a shot caught Shadow's back wheel. He shook his head, putting the gun back in its holster as he watched Brett fall out of his car, rushed to fetch a spare wheel and tried to pick crew his way out of there. He was one less frat boy to worry about, for now, at least. As I set out on this story, I promised the detail as to how much our scenario came to be on Halffield Bay Island that leader of the Wigan Church, Dominic Cole, found himself leading his drugged-up followers with glow sticks. It all came to climax on what had begun as a relatively quiet day in the commune as it still played host to the bros. Life in a religious commune meant just that. Your life was governed by religious texts, and services at the church were a must. The bros expected all of that, and they were up for it. It wasn't the first cult they had joined, and I dare say it wouldn't be the last. Reynolds would probably be the first to agree that Capiso was not unlike a cult in its traditions, selections, and it being a bastard to leave once you were accepted. It was part of Wigan life that seemed to suit the bros in a way. They were three drug-addicted, privileged young men who had no direction. Wigan offered them that direction. When a church service was called, they found themselves front and centre, eager to hear. On this day, some of the girls were pushing each other out of the way to get to the front and sit beside Cooper. The girl who won the fight, with a tug of her sister's hair's long braid, smiled ever so pleased with herself as she squeezed in close to him. The girl giggled into her hand coquettishly. With a grin, Buddy punched his bro's arm playfully and turned back to the front where Dominic was stood on the altar glaring at him. "Do you mind?" "No worries, bruh," replied Buddy. Stepping in, Chad explained. "You see, Riding a Cooper is all about a hard ass and a big stick shift you can really wrap your hand around. Buddy raised an eyebrow. He leaned forward and asked the girl suggessively, You ever rode a Cooper? The girl giggled even harder, but then she looked at Dominic and checked herself. Chad reached his hands out. But this is praying time, bruh. Carry on. Dominic's lips pursed. He turned to Peter. Can they no be here when I'm doing my thing? I'm afraid they're members of the congregation now, Your Eminence. Dominic rolled his eyes, but he did have souls to save, and so his sermon began, filled with unforgiving tales of Noah Wiggin and his damnation of the city. Praise Wiggin, Capasso! The three frat bros looked behind them to spy the girl who had cheekily called out their frat chant. Batting his fist on his chest and reaching out the peace sign, Cooper replied, Respect, bruh. Dominic was, of course, furious, but he was nothing if not a man who could keep his congregation squared. Jeez, I thought that guy would have chilled by now, Buddy whispered to Chad. Should have, Chad agreed. We put a shit ton of powder in that wine right there, bro. Just needs time to kick in, Buddy decided. In about 5 minutes, this place is going to be party central. Impatient, Chad drew a whistle from inside his shirt. Buddy steadied his hand. Wait for it, bro. Wait for it. On the altar, Dominic could hear Peter shuffle uncomfortably. Are you right there, Peter? He asked him. A sweat was breaking on the priest's brow. He was tapping his foot in a steady rhythm. Feel good, he assured. Great Elvis. You tell them there, son. You tell them, Dominic. Dominic raised the wine and sniffed it. It did smell a little sweeter than usual. Chad classed the whistle excitedly, but Buddy stopped him again. Not yet, bro. The whole congregation started to become joyous. They were singing, they were praising. There was a miracle with some of the disabled who had taken to their feet and were dancing. Praise Wiggin! Dominic would have taken it as a compliment, but he hadn't said anything for the past 10 minutes. Now, Chad! Whee! The whistle blew. It's party time! Chad announced. What the hell have you done? Dominic asked him. We're getting this party started. We're getting everyone so high we're going to high-five St. Wiggin, Buddy told him. At that point, he realised that the church leader should have been in on the plan, but his experience of Dominic so far was that he was a bit of a party crasher. We get some of our best powder, your cheap-ass wine. We are going to buzz off our asses, bro. So you're telling me, Dominic shoved Bart away, who was stumbling towards him like a brain-dead zombie, that you cut cocaine into our wine? Yes, I know the service was great, thanks, Peter. Well, yeah, Buddy responded as though it were so obvious. The entire congregation has been drinking that wine, Dominic stated. Buddy grinned. Well, yeah, Buddy responded as though it were oh so obvious. Dominic gave a most severe scowl. They're all high on heathers too. I know, Bart, the music is legend. Well, why are they all high on heathers? Buddy asked. Because it's Sunday, Dominic replied. Bitchin'. Buddy's priorities became confused. You mean to tell me you've been passing out the magic mushies and you didn't hit up a bro? It's not cool, man. I didn't give you any because you're coke kids, Dominic explained through gritted teeth. They do funny things to the brain and mix with powder, Mrs. O'Connell. Well, you put that back on. 80-year-old Mrs. O'Connell was now pulling her bra from her sleeve. Dude, this party's about to get way out of hand, Buddy said. Dominic agreed. You don't say. Weak! Chad blew his whistle again, and the powder-laced mushroom-mellowed congregation responded. We're going to need to put them in a hole until they sober up. It's the only way. Luckily for everyone involved, a crater had already been blown into the beach. Before Dominic could ask how they proposed to do that, Chad had pulled 2 glow sticks from his emergency party pack he had kept stored beneath the church pew. He snapped them and passed them to Dominic. Dominic's obvious question would have been, What are these for? But before he could utter the words, Bart's hand landed on his shoulder and he whacked him back. Do they need to be glowing? Dominic did ask. He assumed they were to beat the congregation with, who were now cornering them at the altar. You gotta lead them, bro, Chad explained. Look! Chad waved his own glow sticks and then out of his mind Peter's eyes followed. Dominic waved his, but a little too sporadically. It's not working. It's all in the hip action, dude, again Chad demonstrated. For fuck's sake, Dominic despaired, but he shook his hips and waved those glow sticks. For a brief moment, it was as if Jerry Owen had never left the island. That, dear readers, was how the disaster on the island came to be. Weak! To the crater, bro! Alright, take us to the crater then. Alright, listen up everyone, follow me! Time to show you my big hole! Never had the Wigan commune followed Dominic so closely and so keenly. To the top of the dune they went, into the crater they fell. Badly hungover they would be. All that was left of the adventure was to make the journey home. Luckily for our heroes and the bros, the O&Ink flight attendants knew exactly how to handle the frat boys. Brought back to the ranch, the three were stood in a line in the Cappy's den. Buddy was sober. He was real sober, Chick was glad to see. They shared a look. When I say they shared a look, I mean Buddy kept his sober gaze ahead whilst his father glared at him. The cost, the loss of sleep, the hassle from Breckenridge firm for using Elizabeth's agents. Chick's glare held a lot of frustration. He shook his head and went on down the line like an inspecting drill sergeant. There was the son of Marshal Cooper, Dale. Fast cars, showpieces, and fans all around the world was what Dale would have handed to him one day. In the meantime, there he was. His eyes were wider than any I had ever seen. He had a long way to go, but he was back in Colford now. Chick shook his head. At least he could let Marshall know he was safe. Marshall would probably say he should have lost a little run over on the stage, but Chick at least cared about him. In this instant, Chick's care meant shaking his head and continuing on down the line. Chad Perry was next. Chick raised an eyebrow at him. Even after the flight back from the great stage, Chad was still feeling that groove in his hip. He kept bouncing as Chick watched him. Cooper and Buddy leaned forward to see, but they snapped back into place when Chick shook his head again and they made his way back up the line. "What am I to do with y'all?" he asked. Buddy had no answer. He was trying to comprehend how his father sounded when he was sober. And was he always that blonde? In the Cappy's den, surrounded by the icons of the own heritage, was where my story took me next as Dan and I concluded with the Cappy. "I want to thank you," said Chick to me as he finished poring over my notes. "You've given an honest account. It would be easy to smear the boys. Lord knows they gave plenty of reason for that. But you put your mind to it, and never in a month of Sundays would I expect such an understanding of them. I guess I forget how it can be to deal with honest men sometimes. I told you I would only write the truth. Sometimes it can be ugly. Sometimes it's difficult to read, but it's what people need. I do genuinely hope Buddy, Dale and Chad can get help." Chick smiled. "Thank you, Sam. Colford Daily miss your inside." I shrugged with a smile. "I'm afraid I won't miss the Colford Daily." The Cappy laughed and raised his glass. He addressed Dan when he said, "You're both owed a great debt of gratitude." Dan sat a packet on the desk. "This belongs here," he said. "I wanted you to have it back." The Cappy opened the packet, and inside lay the compass of Hen Owen, the Cappy's most prized ancestor. Elizabeth Breckenridge had smashed the historical item in what can only be described as a tantrum over who held more property in the city. Chick sighed with some relief. "I'm at a loss for words," he began. "I'm mighty grateful you would return this. Where does she have it?" Dan looked to me at first, but then he explained. It was in the wastebasket at the Felton Press." Chick nodded. "That sounds about right. I have to make some calls and see if it can be restored." "Can I make a suggestion?" Dan put in. "Don't. Leave as it is." A broken compass is no use to anyone, but Dan's reasoning was as such. You keep these things because they have a history. They tell a story. You have Hen Owen's maps because they were used to guide his ship, tears, burns and all. They aren't perfect because they tell a story that later generations still speak of. The same will be for that compass. Future generations will speak of how you faced down a dragon and the compass was smashed in the heat. Chick contemplated the broken compass. "You're right," he decided. "What a story to tell it'll be." Dan patted my shoulder. "That's why we're here." Chick folded his arms across his chest. "You have a remarkable team," Chick had said to Kim. "You do a whole lot of good all round. I'm sure Detective Fix would be proud." It had all been quiet on the bay after the bros left, as I'm sure you can imagine. Dominic was knelt at his altar again, praying. He was praying for the souls of the bros, believe it or not. He had been a young boy seeking guidance once too. He could sympathise. With the corruption and unholy evil over in the city, it was easy to become consumed. St. Wiggin, he prayed. May they find peace. May you grant them the strength to beat their addiction and become better men. Noah Wiggin once said, we are all connected in some way. Whether that connection was godly, whether it was the longing to understand the wider world, or whether it was boring so your lad wouldn't fall off, it was a connection. He had learned something too by their presence. His father, Gabriel Cole, was a heartless bastard with impossible standards. He and his sister were merely pawns for him to manoeuvre within the church. Dominic had been beaten so much with religious teachings and expectations, he had forgotten that life was to be lived. The bros were nothing if not a good reminder of that. Dominic looked up. He kissed his clasped fingers, taking in the cross of St. Wiggin. His teachings had to be brought to the city. With the right approach, the city dwellers could be embraced and shown the way. Dominic frowned a little. He unclasped his hands and stood. He took a little closer look at the painting that hung permanently in the main wall of the church. Is that a cock drawn on St. Michael? He raged. Fuck it, they're all heathen cunts. Reynolds had just emerged from his office to hear Kim cry, those fucking Owens. There had been quite a runaround given to the agents on account of the influential family, mostly Buddy. However, thankfully the good gang prevailed, facing some insurmountable odds. Reynolds, looking a little beaten himself, was concerned for Kim's welfare. She would survive, and she would be stronger for it. What's happened around here? She asked. Reynolds shook his head and said, there'll be time for that later. A lot of it was still going on at this point, but for the time being, he was keen to hear of their adventure. Chloe came rushing behind her. Kim! She tugged her arm gently, but excitedly. There's a man here to see you. Oh, Lydia teased, kept that quiet. The man Chloe referred to cut quite a figure in Colford. Teddy Owen stood in the Harbour House reception hall looking a little nervous. Beverly behind the reception desk was taking a much closer look. Ted? Kim smiled at the one Owen she was pleased to see at this stage. What are you doing here? Chick was fussing for me to come and visit. I was mighty keen on seeing what your Colford city was like. And I was not disappointed. Well, you're aware a stoning occurred recently like in biblical times. Too aware, answered Reynolds. Kim introduced them. John Reynolds, this is Teddy Owen. Teddy, this is John Reynolds. Reynolds clasped his hand tightly. I heard a letter about you from Sam, he said. Keeping those guys alive makes you an early dude in my books. Teddy blushed. I'm only as good as the people I have to work with, he replied, which is why I'm here. I was wondering if the offer of employment with your agency was still available. Chick and I have discussed it, and I feel guilty for not being there for Buddy when I should have. I'd like to stay in the city for a while and help out where I can. I've brought my curriculum vitae if you'd like to see it. Kim beamed. No need, Ted, she said. We're grateful for all the help we can get. That, dear readers, was the adventure to the great States. It was filled with danger, excitement, and opened the eyes of this reporter to the wider world that lay outside the shady city. Detective Joel Hicks would have been proud. With dedication to duty and the relentless pursuit of all that was good, the agents upheld his vision, and as I returned my attention back to the city and the events that unfolded there, never was there more need for Hicks Agency, better known as the Good Gang.